So I think that this is Israel's play now. It's using these tactical operations to regain the strategic and operational initiative in the wider region, and also showcasing some of its capabilities in terms of reaching, the center of Tehran by assassinating Ismail Haniyeh, or its intelligence prowess through the targeting of an important commander in Hezbollah's military hierarchy in the heart of Al-Dahiya neighborhood in Beirut.
Hi, I'm Yumna Patel, Palestine News Director at Mondoweiss. This is the Mondoweiss podcast. In the past 24 hours, Israel has carried out high-profile assassinations in both Iran and Lebanon, targeting key figures within Hamas and Hezbollah. In Tehran, Ismail Haniyeh, head of Hamas's political bureau, was killed in a missile strike. Meanwhile, in Beirut, an Israeli attack targeted Hezbollah's senior commander, Fuad Shukr, whose condition remains unknown as of this recording. These events follow last week's bombing of Yemen's Ansarullah or Houthi-controlled Hodeidah seaport, further expanding the scope of Israel's military actions. Together, these incidents reflect a broader strategy by Israel to dismantle resistance movements across the region, even at the risk of sparking a wider regional conflict. All of this is happening, of course, as we enter the 10th month of Israel's devastating genocide on Gaza. In this episode, I speak with our Palestine staff writer, Qassam Muaddi, who's based in Ramallah, to give us a breakdown of the events of the past 24 hours and the fallout that we're seeing on the ground. Later on, I speak with Abdel Jawad Omar, a Palestinian writer and analyst, on what the implications of these assassinations could have on a wider regional conflict, what Israel hopes to gain from these moves, and the impact of Haniyeh's assassination on the future of Hamas. So, Qassam, can you quickly break down for us what has happened in the past 24 hours?
First of all, the first assassination attempt, at least, was the one that you mentioned in Beirut. And this was through an airstrike at Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut's southern suburb known as Dahiya. And it targeted a building where a senior military commander of Hezbollah, Fuad Shukr, known also as Haj Muhsin, was confirmed to have been present. And so this assassination attempt, at least an attempt, came after 3 days of tensions after Israel accused Hezbollah of being behind a projectile that exploded in Majd al-Shams, the Syrian occupied town in the Golan Heights, that killed 12 children and teenagers. Hezbollah, of course, denied the accusations and said that it was a round of the Iron Dome that malfunctioned, which some residents of Majd al-Shams said that it has happened during this war, that Iron Dome anti-missile rounds malfunction and fall in open areas and explode, so it's not unlikely. But Israel accused Hezbollah anyway, and kind of took it as an excuse to escalate with Hezbollah. So basically, the strike itself was sort of like not surprising, but at the same time, much below what was expected. And Israel claimed responsibility for that strike. Of course, nobody knows what happened with Fuad Shukr. At the beginning, there were reports that he survived. Later, Hezbollah said that his fate remains unknown. Fuad Shukr is, as I said, member of the military council of Hezbollah. He's a senior commander. He's been in the armed resistance for more than 40 years before Hezbollah was established. So it's a serious escalation because it's in Hezbollah's stronghold. It's in the Dahiya, and it's somebody who was described as a right hand to Hassan Nasrallah, Secretary General of Hezbollah. Then the next thing that happened was this morning, the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, which was confirmed, and this one was much more dangerous, let's say, in terms of escalation, because it happened first on Iranian soil. So Ismail Haniyeh Iran to participate in the inauguration of the president-elect of Iran, and he was basically a diplomatic guest of Iran under Iranian protection, and he was assassinated in the Iranian capital. Now, Israel didn't claim responsibility directly. On the contrary, Netanyahu banned all his ministers to make public statements, but nevertheless, some of them did make statements celebration statements. The Minister of Heritage actually celebrated. He's the same minister that early on in this war proposed to drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza. And he said this is the correct way to cleanse the world, and that the world is a better place without Haniya. Then the public broadcast in Israel revealed a very interesting information that the attack did not happen through the Air Force, but through a missile attack that happened from outside of Iranian soil, which is something that only those who, somebody who knows, how it happened, could say. Now, now Iranian officials have officially accused Israel. The Iranian Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, directly accused Israel, pledged revenge, or in his words, a harsh punishment. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps also said that there will be a harsh response from the axis of the resistance, so all the allies of Iran, but from Iran particularly. And this is what has now put the entire region on the brink of a regional war.
So what does the situation look like right now on the ground in Palestine? And we'll get to the wider region in a moment, but I want to ask, how are people reacting in the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip with the news of Haniya's assassination, and also this fear, or concern that people have of this escalating into a broader regional conflict?
Yeah. So first of all, in the Gaza Strip, the things that people might fear in the rest of the region, people in the Gaza Strip have already been living the most extreme forms of it for 10 months. But there was reported a sense of grieving, especially in Gaza City and in the Shati refugee camp, where Ismail Haniyeh was born and grew up, and where he was known as a very respected social figure who knew everybody and who was always around, knowing people and going to social events and that sort of thing. In the West Bank, there was a general strike that was declared in all of the cities of the West Bank, and it has been observed very, very strictly. The city of Ramallah, where I'm based, everything is closed since the morning and till tomorrow morning. Same thing is in Nablus, in Hebron, and in the rest of the West Bank governorates, especially in the cities. There have been protests and marches. Beginning in Hebron, then in Nablus, and then even in Ramallah. A general sense of grieving and an observation of general strike, calls to protests in the coming days at checkpoints. And the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, declared a day of mourning and officially condemned the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, because we need to take into account that Ismail Haniyeh is not just a leader of Hamas. He is a former prime minister of the Palestinian government, and he's a key figure in Palestinian politics. He was a key figure in the reconciliation talks, and he has an official status, let's say, in Palestine. He was also one of the key figures in the talks between different factions over the past years, to coordinate positions and stands together. So he's somebody who has a high profile status in Palestinian politics, which makes him more of a national figure rather than just a Hamas leader. And this explains some of this reaction that we're seeing.
And so you talked about sort of the national reaction. I'm curious to ask you, what has Hamas's response been like as an organization? Have we heard anything from other Hamas leaders on this?
Yes. Well, Hamas, in the early hours following the assassination, officially declared before the Iranians did that this was an assassination committed by Israel. And then there was a press conference held by another senior Hamas leader, Khalil al-Hayya, who basically said that this assassination comes after a long series of assassinations against Hamas and, in a broader sense, Palestinian leaders for decades. And, they have been saying that this will not affect Hamas strategically, let's say, that This is like the killing of the Hamas founder, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, and his successor at the head of Hamas, Abdelaziz al-Rantisi, that Hamas will continue its mission, and that the leadership will renew itself. Something interesting that was said was in a statement by Hamas military wing, the Qassam brigades, who said that this assassination takes the entire conflict or this battle, that they said, referring to the current war, to a new level. And it's anyone guess what they mean exactly by that, given that the Qassam brigades are engaged already in an all-out war against Israel in the Gaza Strip for 10 months. But it could be a reference to the fact that now other players are involved directly, given the nature of the assassination being also a challenge to Iran and to other allies of Hamas in the region.
So we talked about, what Hezbollah has vowed in terms of a response, Iran's vowed response as well. You mentioned, sort of what Hamas is saying around the fact that, now there are other players involved, and this is stoking the flames of a much wider conflict. Israel also claimed responsibility recently, just days before for these assassinations. The bombing of the Yemen's Ansarullah-controlled Hodeidah seaport. How does that fit into these recent attacks, the assassination on Haniya and the attack on Beirut?
We should also remember that Netanyahu was in the United States giving his speech when the Majd al-Shams incident happened. So maybe what happened is that Netanyahu saw an opportunity to basically sabotage the talks of the ceasefire and just prolong the war, which is obviously what he has been trying to do for months already. And maybe the encouragement that he found in the U.S. Congress with 3-minute standing ovations for whatever he said encouraged him to do just that. So these attempts or these attacks on Yemen, on Hezbollah and Hamas in Iran, and therefore on Iran, can be seen as a clear message by Israel that they're just taking in everybody in the region. That Netanyahu is willing a regional war, and rather than just to conclude a ceasefire.
And you've been following for months in your coverage the northern front, basically the border between Israel and Lebanon, and the crossfire that has been going on for months between Hezbollah and the Israeli military. I want to ask you, what implications do you think that these latest attacks are going to have on that northern front? What can we expect to unfold in the coming weeks?
It's hard to say, especially after the assassination of Haniya, because now the response is not limited to Hezbollah. Without the assassination of Haniya, like until last night, what everybody expected was a proportionate response by Hezbollah, which is what they already announced they would do, and within the range of what Israel had prepared to. So nothing that would lead to a major war. Basically, some qualitative rocket targeting something by Hezbollah to some sensitive place in Israel that would lead maybe to some days of fire exchange, and then it would be all brought down. The tension would be brought down. But after the assassination of Haniya, things change, because now these allies are basically connected, and the attack is like one attack in two folds, and Iran is directly implicated. Now we saw that Hezbollah has responded to Israel's assassinations of its leaders in the south, basically in the territory that has already been turned into a battlefield, with very, very harsh and wide rocket attacks of hundreds of rockets, provoking widespread fires in the Galilee. And these responses by Hezbollah are what actually brought Israel at to the last brink of just attacking Lebanon outright. So we can expect at least something like that, but maybe something more after the assassination of a leader that is so high ranking and in the stronghold of Hezbollah.
Well, Qassam, thank you so much for joining us and for that breakdown of the events that have unfolded in the past 24 hours. To continue to follow Qassam's work and his coverage of the events in Gaza and in Palestine and across the wider region, you can see his work on mondoweiss.net. Thanks, Qassam.
Thank you.
Joining us to talk about the current situation as it unfolds in Iran and Lebanon and the potential implications for the wider region is Palestinian PhD student and writer Abdeljawad Omar. Abdeljawad, thanks for joining us. So I wanted to start off by asking you, what is Israel hoping to achieve by striking Beirut and Tehran in less than 24 hours?
Well, I think Israel has reached a critical stage in what has been now, for a couple of months at least, a war of attrition. And it's caught between the desire to reach an agreement that returns the Israeli captives from Gaza, but at the same time of regaining escalation dominance and initiative in the broader region. And therefore, these actions comes at this critical juncture where it needs to show its ability to conduct highly powerful tactical successes against resistance groups, whether it's in Lebanon vis-a-vis Hezbollah, or whether it's Hamas as well, through the assassination of its political leader who was visiting Tehran in Iran at the invitation of the Iranian state. So what this does for Israel is twofold. It enables it to claim that it's now on the offensive, and at the same time, it enables it to regain what it has been losing for the past couple of months, which is the escalation dominance, or the dominance in escalation that it slowly but assuredly lost in its confrontation with Hezbollah after Hezbollah opened fire on October 8th, and also lost with Iran after the blows that it exchanged with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the Iranian military in the wake of the assassination of Iran military generals in April of this year. So I think that this is Israel's play now. It used this tactical it's used this tactical successes. It's using these tactical operations to regain the strategic and operational initiative in the wider region, and also showcasing some of its capabilities in terms of reaching the center of Tehran by assassinating Ismail Haniyeh, or its intelligence prowess through the targeting of an important commander in Hezbollah's military hierarchy in the heart of Al-Dahiya neighborhood in Beirut.
So, since these assassinations and the attacks, both Hezbollah and Iran have vowed a response to the assassinations. Many are saying that it seems like regional war and escalation could be inevitable. But of course, like you mentioned, now this isn't the first time that Israel has struck targets, important targets in either locations. So, what are the chances that this escalates into an all-out regional war? And is that something that Israel or Iran and Hezbollah actually want?
I still insist, and I think many would agree, that neither Israel nor Iran or Hezbollah desire an all-out war. I think that this is a struggle over who has the upper hand, rather than a struggle that necessarily leads to an open form of warfare or a regional warfare that sees all the players involved. However, having said that, Israel's operations does push both Hezbollah and Iran to the corner, in the sense that they must deal Israel a blow or a response, but they must ensure that the response does not also cross a threshold where it would see a larger regional warfare taking place that both of these actors and others in the region do not want to see. So this is an intricate dance across this, deterrence, mutual deterrence, capabilities that both of these major actors in the Middle East are playing. And despite the intentions of not going to a form of open warfare, we could see ourselves slowly but assuredly reaching that critical mass. I do think as well that Israel does not want an open war. I think that after 10 months of its successive failures also in Gaza tactically and operationally, its inability to really defeat the resistance forces in the Gaza Strip, the attritional warfare that has been taking a toll on its military, on its armored vehicles, on its economy, and its social fabric. I do not think that Israel is also in a place to actually initiate a broader conflict with formidable forces that have the ability to hurt Israeli infrastructure, whether civilian and military, and deal it a serious blow within its own territory. So in both of these instances, I think the struggle is more around this escalation ladder and who dominates it, who has an upper hand. And at the same time, finding within the rules of the game places where both actors can flirt with open warfare without truly launching themselves into the abyss of war.
It's also not insignificant that this was carried out just days after Netanyahu visited the U.S., met with President Biden, with Vice President Kamala Harris, who's now running for president, and after he received multiple standing ovations in Congress. So I'm wondering, in your view, how does the U.S. factor into all of this? Politically, what's Israel maybe trying to gain out of the U.S. from this, or what message is it trying to send here?
Well, we talked a lot about the operational and tactical successes that Israel is hinging itself on, this kind of struggle over the dominance and escalation. But I think politically, what it's trying to do at least is corner the resistance axis that has allied itself with the Palestinian resistance through this concept of unity of field, and attempting to the best attempting in the best possible way to decouple this form of support that Hezbollah and Iran and other players in the region, including Ansarullah in Yemen, have been providing and provisioning the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. So Israel hopes that these types of action will lead to a form of pressure that could, at the end, be placed on Hamas by its own allies. That's one element of Israeli thinking by conducting these actions. The second element is, if we are heading towards the possibility of a ceasefire agreement coming into play in the coming month, that Israel would end the war on a high note within this upper hand. I think that after October 7th, Israel has realized that its strategy of defensive posture, of placing air defenses, of ensuring that it has this overwhelming deterrence capacity, which we saw fail miserably on October 7th, that now it's entering a new phase of wars and confrontation and conflicts in the coming future. However, it also needs some sort of respite from the current war, from the attrition happening in the north, from the attrition happening in Gaza, and returning its captives in the Gaza Strip. So these forces are pressuring Israel internally, including the social implosion that we have seen a lot of signs of, the continuation of the internal struggle within Israeli society, the erosion of the circles of trust in the society between the military and society, between the military and the political brass. So in many ways, Israel is also looking for some sort of respite, some sort of, moment to take a breath, to regroup, to reorder its forces before it also, concentrate its efforts towards its adversaries across the region, including Ansarullah in Yemen, Hezbollah, the Iraqi resistance forces, and the Iranians. So I do think that there is an opening now for some sort of agreement, and the Americans play a big role in this, in the sense that they want to give Israel support to conduct these forms of targeted assassinations, to take the upper hand in negotiations, to pressure the resistant forces to agree to Israeli terms in any ceasefire agreement. But at the same time, the Americans are not interested in a regional warfare and would want to contain an Israeli response to a level that would ensure that the resistance axis would not have an excuse or will not be legitimated by Israeli actions to conduct even more massive response and retaliation. So the Americans are playing this intricate dance, if you want, with the resistance axis, and through that, attempting to garner the best possible agreement, whether it's in the northern borders or in the Gaza for their Israeli allies. I think this is where we're at this critical moment. That does not mean that we will have or we will see an agreement, but I think that's the Israeli American at least game plan in the coming days and weeks.
So I wanted to ask you about a ceasefire deal and what this means for it. Negotiations have been stalled for months, and Ismail Haniyeh, being the head of Hamas's political bureau, was the figure effectively in charge of kind of spearheading the negotiations on Hamas's side. So, some analysts have said that effectively killing Haniyeh kills the ceasefire process. Now, you're saying here that actually Israel is trying to get the upper hand to potentially work out a better deal that can put pressure on this axis of resistance, and it can come out with a deal that is better for Israel. So, what do you make of this? I mean, do you think that a ceasefire now is totally off the table, or is that still a possibility?
No, I do think it's a possibility. Again, I think that there are enough pressures from within Israel, whether it's own security brass, whether it's own security network, which includes the military and a lot of the, ex-Mossad chiefs, ex-Shabak chiefs. They're all pressuring for some sort of agreement, because I think that in Israeli calculation, they see that they've rendered Gaza, destroyed in a physical sense. It means that Gaza, for a long time to come, does not have the prowess to really engage in any form of warfare with Israel. That they have, to the extent possible, even though they did not destroy Hamas's military capacity, nor its existence in the Gaza Strip, nor its ability to hurt Israeli forces, that there will not be a taste for war for a long time in Gaza. And I think that slowly but assuredly, this security brass is looking to the wider region and looking to its adversaries in Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria, and Iran as the next front that they need to deal seriously with. However, having said that, they need time for that, because they were surprised on October 7th. So they're pushing for an agreement to happen. I think Netanyahu was hinging the agreement because of his own political survival, because of the pressure coming from his right-wing flank that threatened the government with its dissolution if any agreement would occur. However, there is an opening now, because the Knesset has been, has gone into a period where a break for 2 months until October 27th. And that gives little maneuvering space for Netanyahu's partners in the coalition to actually bring down the government. So Netanyahu has more maneuverability space. The Americans as well, they don't want the regional warfare. A regional warfare would mean the end of economic recovery in the wider international economy. It would mean the return of inflation and inflationary pressures. It would hurt the chances of Democrats coming back to power in the United States. So there's two options with Israel: either to drag this out and continue in the same posture that it has been conducting for the past couple of months, while increasing the pressure on resistance forces in the region, like Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, or it will continue to accept this form of attritional warfare alongside that, or it would have to do a ceasefire agreement that gives it some space and respite from the current confrontation and military exchange that it has been conducting, whether on the northern border or in Gaza. These are the two major options that Israel has, and it would hope, and Netanyahu would hope, for instance, that Trump will come to power. He would be more amenable. I think in Israelis' wet dreams, they would want America to fight their wars on their behalf. That's the That's the major, the major strategic success for any Israeli government, is that the Americans would fight our wars, not us fighting our own wars. Especially in this type of warfare that we are speaking about with Hezbollah, Iran, and others in the axis of resistance, where Israel would see hundreds of thousands of rockets flying into Israel, where it might see some limited incursions into its own territory. We might see also its large quantity of its own military equipment, its strategic civilian sites and military sites being bombarded. Israel without electricity or without water or without, these are all possible scenarios in a wider confrontation and configuration. So Israel is looking for America as the country that might fight our own wars, or at least be alongside with us in any major confrontation with these resistance groups across the region. So I think that at this critical juncture, sustaining the current mode of operation is costly economically, socially, and politically on Israel. It maintains the strategic dilemma that it's placing itself in. It maintains the pressure from legal mechanisms across the globe, including the ICC and ICJ. It erodes its legitimacy in the eyes of the vast majority of the global South and global North populations. It's politicizing people in different ways and, introducing people to the Palestinian struggle. So it's losing a lot on a lot of different fronts, and I think it wants to stop that hemorrhage as well. I think that another type of thinking that exists in Israel is that we should drag this on. This is a war that was forced upon us, and we should continue to the best of our abilities to garner as many successes as we can while dragging this out and finishing the job, which means in the minds of some in Israel, including the right-wing fascists, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population between the river and the sea, starting with Gaza and moving on to other geographies. So there's also a struggle within Israel over priorities. Like the military brass and the security brass is more concerned about the Iranian nuclear program, about Hezbollah, about what happens to the north, while the right-wing fascists are concerned more about sustaining Jewish supremacy between the river and the sea through an ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza or in the West Bank, or even within Israel itself with the Palestinian citizens of Israel. So there is that struggle happening. We don't know who will succeed, but I think Netanyahu now has more maneuverability to go along with his military and security brass and to contain the rejection of his right-wing flank. So there is an opening for some sort of agreement to happen. And maybe we're seeing these blows, and maybe this is hopeful thinking and wishful thinking, but maybe these are the blows that Israel would end its war on, not start a new war. But I think, again, these are two legitimate readings of Israeli intentions, because part of this war is what I mean by that is that part of the war and its dragging on is also part of Israeli strength to some degree. It doesn't mean it's a calculated, rational strength. It's trying to send a signal to the Arab world, to its adversaries and enemies, that it would be able or would sustain a long durée war with its enemies and adversaries, even on the cost of its international legitimacy, even on the cost of its media flop in the world, even on the cost of rising dissent across the global north and south, even at the cost of its own economy and social, social, let's say, social life and fabric. So I think that, there is an element of strength to that, the element to incur and sustain loss, but and to sustain the war and to sustain the will to fight, and to elude or to say that you want to resolve the conflict, but to continue with it, hoping that the adversaries will blink first and they will give up first. So that might be part of the Israeli also game plan here. However, as we saw in recently, a lot of Israeli media are pointing out that Netanyahu is more concerned with his political survival. And I think that that's not the biggest issue at this current juncture. What we've seen in the past couple of months, specifically in the past couple of weeks, is that Netanyahu's, showing in polls is making him more competitive. That there is a real possibility of him even returning to power, even if an election happens. That Israelis still yearn for this father figure embodied in the figure of Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, I think, is more comfortable, whether with his own right-wing flank or with the left of center or with his security and military brass, to maneuver in a way that would perhaps enable some sort of ceasefire agreement to come through, and at the same time maintaining the military posture for years to come. But having said what I said, and I took too long to say it, but and I think Israel has entered an era of wars. I do think that even if we have a ceasefire agreement, even if we have temporary respite from the war, I think that Israel will still go on the offensive in many arenas and fields of struggle. I don't think that we're seeing an end of the conditions for the reigniting of wars, whether with Lebanon or Iran or other places. So this would be just a temporary respite for some months, years, I don't know, but that will end, at some point in the near future.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about Israel. I want to switch gears to Hamas and to, what you referred to as this axis of resistance of, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran, as well as Ansarullah in Yemen. This assassination of Ismail Haniyeh didn't come, in a vacuum. Israel has a long history of carrying out assassinations on key leaders of Palestinian political and resistance movements, even just in the past few months as well. So, but historically, it's also failed to deter groups like Hamas and to, dissolve them, or whatever stated aim, they might have from carrying out such assassinations. The clearest demonstration of that failure, as you mentioned, was the events of October 7th. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, what does the assassination of Haniyeh, who's this senior figure in Hamas, what does it mean for the future of Hamas, let's say, right now in the short term, as the Israel's, military campaign continues in Gaza, but as well into the near future. And the follow-up to that would be, what does this also mean for what you referred to as this axis of resistance?
Israel has a long history of killing those it negotiates with, because it wants to sustain this colonial equation of supremacy, racism, and it does not want to see its enemies as equal in its own eyes. So it sustains this policy of assassination, also stemming from just a racist colonial mentality. So this is one facet of this form of policy. The second facet of it is that historically Israel used it to actually design the nature of the leadership that exists on the other side. And in the context of some of the political challenges that it faced, for instance, in the context of the PLO in the 70s and 80s, assassinations did play a role in some point or another in composing a leadership that is more amenable to Israeli policies, including its demand for the Palestinian leadership to recognize Israel, to engage in surrender talks, what was called, the Oslo peace agreements, and to engage with counterinsurgency efforts now after the Second Intifada, with figures like Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Comprador class coming into power. And they came to power because there was no significant nationalist leadership to confront them, including, Israel in the Second Intifada, for instance, arrested Marwan Barghouti, one of the key leaders of Fatah, also arrested Ahmed Saadat, the leader of the Palestinian Front for the Liberation of Palestine. It also assassinated some of the leaders of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. So it has intended through these assassination policies to recompose the Palestinian leadership. However, ironically, since the Second Intifada, I think that policy is quite mute for two reasons. First, within Palestinian resistance forces, we're not talking now about small cells or very small organizations that, if you kill one key figure within them, they completely falter or dissipate, and they lose their power to sustain themselves through time. We're talking about large scale institutions with an established infrastructure, with an alliance system, and with an intricate leadership composition that makes them more immune to this assassination policy and its impact on their organizational sustainability. So there's that one facet of that, and that includes also Hezbollah. It includes Iran. Israel assassinates its own military leaders every couple of years by replacing them. No, in many senses, in many ways, by assassinating one figure or another, it doesn't do much in terms of its effect on the Palestinian resistance or the Lebanese resistance or Ansar Allah in Yemen or other places. Only in cases where a leader has a high charismatic value or has a specific skill set that nobody else has, that such loss would actually have, a real impact either operationally or tactically or on the group's composition and coherence. And I think that, again, because of the institutionalization of these resistance forces and their move away from a style of leadership that is based on personal charisma, it means that the impact of assassinations have become minute. However, having said that, I think that in large part, because of this racist mentality that we spoke of not seeing the Palestinians as legitimate political actors, of attempting to render them also outside the frail, of placing them as only killable or arrestable, of refusing to talk a political language with the Palestinians. It's also encountering this deep desire among Israel to showcase its own prowess and tactical ingenuity and success to impress its own society. Because what October 7th really represents in Israeli, historical trajectory is this breakdown of its own military prowess, not only in the gaze of the other, meaning in the gaze of Palestinians and the resistance axis, but in the eyes of its own society and population. Their military failed them, their intelligence failed them, their intricate systems of air defense failed them, their intricate defense of their borders failed them. And it was a moment, that left the Israeli psyche shattered. And I think part of the assassination policy now, part of placing people on cards and saying, I eliminated this person or I eliminated that person, beyond this kind of playful use of these cards, beyond the colonial racist mentality that pervades this, it's also a means or a way to actually attempt to instill in Israeli society once again that Israeli military intelligence is capable. It can still produce these moments of an awesome display of power. And I think that in many ways, what we've seen in the past 24 hours or 48 hours since the assassination of the Hezbollah commander and Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran is more directed towards Israel's internal society rather than actually against its enemies. We did talk about how it impacts its own adversaries, but it also is in large part directed towards its own internal society in an attempt to regain the image of deterrence, not in the eyes of Hezbollah or Iran or Ansar Allah or Hamas, but in the eyes of its own people who are now thinking maybe the state cannot protect me. Maybe the state cannot really sustain a first world economy within the Middle East. Maybe the state cannot really, support our existence in the long term on a stolen land. So this is the thinking that is also part of the internal social fabric that has come in large part to also dominate Israeli psyche, and by doing these actions, it's trying to reassure its own population and its own and potential settlers that want to, immigrate to Israel and live here. So it's trying to say, no, we're still powerful. We still can produce these awesome moments of tactical ingenuity, the use of our Air Force. We can hit in the heart of Tehran and the heart of Beirut, and we can challenge our adversaries in ways and means that can leave them shocked and overwhelmed.
Abdul Jawad, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your analysis. For those of you who are interested in reading more of Abdul Jawad's work, you can visit the Mondoweiss website at mondoweiss.net.
Thank you.
That's our show. Mondoweiss is a non-profit publication with no paywalls. If you would like to support our work, please go to mondoweiss.net/donate. Please leave a rating and review to help other listeners find the show. Subscribe to one of our free email newsletters so you can stay up to date on events in Palestine and related politics here in the US and around the world. Finally, if you have any more feedback, send me an email at dave@mondoweiss.net. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode.